There's a kind of poison that doesn't burn. It smells like perfume and arrives dressed in charm. It doesn't shout or accuse. It whispers. It smiles. It flatters. And while you're nodding, basking in the warmth of being seen and appreciated, it's already digging into your mind, one thin layer at a time. That's how the most dangerous power moves work, not through direct confrontation, but through disguised intimacy. Machiavelli saw this in the courts of princes and kings. He knew that in rooms filled with ambition, not every compliment is a gift. Some are soft blades, wrapped in silk, coated in sugar. And if you can't spot them, if you take them all at face value, then you're not just vulnerable, you're already being shaped. Because those who use this tactic don't arrive as enemies. They smile like friends, speak like mentors, act like admirers. And the moment you thank them, the moment you accept their kindness, they place a quiet collar around your self-perception. It often begins with something that sounds harmless, maybe even touching. You hear someone say, "You're so much better than you used to be." At first, it feels like growth, like someone noticed the journey you've taken, that you've evolved. But beneath that praise, there's a silent insult buried deep. It doesn't admire who you are, it defines who you were. And it doesn't let you forget it. It draws a thick underline beneath your past, one that whispers, "You were once foolish, messy, embarrassing." Suddenly, you're not proud, you're apologetic. The compliment reframes your identity as unstable, as if respect is something you've only recently earned. It places them above you, watching from a distance, keeping score. They weren't beside you through the work. They were the audience. And now, they're the judge. What begins as gratitude quickly turns into guilt. You feel thankful, but also defensive. You feel seen, but also smaller. You want to prove you've truly changed. And in that moment, you become reactive. And nothing is easier to control than a reactive mind. Later, maybe it happens again. This time, it's more subtle. "You're actually really smart," someone says. It's framed like admiration, but the word actually hangs in the air like smoke. It reveals the truth about their expectations. They weren't high. You've surprised them, not because you're brilliant, but because they thought you wouldn't be. That kind of praise doesn't raise you up. It corrects an assumption they already made. So now their compliment does two things at once. It reminds you of how little they expected, and it defines your intelligence as relative, not real. You're not smart in an objective sense. You're smart in comparison to the mistaken image they had of you. And they want you to know that. They want you to feel lucky to be seen in this new light. It's a Machiavellian move. What they're doing is anchoring your status, keeping you from floating too far above what they think you deserve. The more you smile, the more you thank them, the tighter that anchor holds. And without knowing it, you start playing the role they've assigned you, the underestimated one. The underdog, the grateful recipient of their approval. Another day, another phrase. This time it sounds bold, empowering even. "I love how you don't care what anyone thinks." It rings like a badge of honor, like you've freed yourself from the prison of people-pleasing. But listen closely. This compliment is often laced with something else, something colder, because what they're really doing is casting you as socially out of sync. The implication isn't that you're courageous, it's that you're unaware, maybe even awkward. The way they say it, the timing, the tone, it's not lifting you up, it's pushing you away. It suggests you don't follow the herd, not because you're brave, but because you're different, too different. And that label, subtle as it is, starts to cling. Suddenly you're wondering if your authenticity looks strange to others. If your refusal to conform has made you the punchline when you weren't looking. It happens in classrooms, in offices, on social media. Someone praises your independence in a way that makes it feel like isolation. Machiavelli warned about this kind of visibility, Be different, he might say, but never so different that they turn you into a spectacle. Because the moment you become a spectacle, you also become a target. This compliment, this gentle tap on the back, is sometimes just a setup to push you into a corner where you shine alone and where you're most vulnerable. It continues with a kind of praise that twists your strength into coincidence. You're lucky to be so confident, someone tells you. And there it is again, the poison with the perfume, luck. That one word removes all the weight from your journey, all the quiet effort, all the silent practice, all the failure you had to rise from. When someone says this, they're not acknowledging what you've earned. They're excusing it. It's their way of saying, I'd be confident too if I had your advantages. That way they get to protect their ego without improving themselves. They don't have to face what they haven't built, because to them, you didn't build it either. Now, if you try to explain the years of work, you sound arrogant. If you say nothing, you're agreeing with their narrative. Either way, you lose. That's the trap. But there's a different way to respond. You can smile, stay calm, and say confidence has its price. Then let the silence do the rest. Let them wonder what that price was and how you paid it. That's not arrogance, that's strategy. That's the kind of silence Machiavelli admired, one that unsettles without force. Then there's the kind that sounds like they're on your side, like they believe in your greatness. They tell you, you're too good for this, too good for the job, the relationship, the team, the room. And in that moment, it feels like they see something special in you. It feels like encouragement, but it's something else entirely. What they're really doing is planting dissatisfaction, making you question where you are, who you're with, what you've chosen. It makes you restless, disconnected. And while you're doubting everything, they position themselves as the voice of truth, the person who knows what you really deserve. But be careful, because that voice often has an agenda. They're not lifting you for your sake. They're moving you for theirs. This kind of compliment isolates you. It disconnects you from what's grounding you. It tells you that stability is weakness, that comfort is compromise. And sometimes it convinces you to walk away from things that were helping you grow just because they weren't glamorous enough. Machiavelli saw this happen to rulers all the time. They'd be praised into walking away from their strongest allies, praised into burning bridges, praised into abandoning their own thrones. Because once pride is flattered, it starts making decisions your wisdom wouldn't. And so the most dangerous praise isn't the loudest. It's the kind that disguises its intention. The kind that makes you feel taller even as it hollows the ground beneath you. There's something haunting about being told you brighten the room. It sounds like a warm embrace at first, like someone is acknowledging the energy you bring. The way your presence seems to soften the edges of a harsh world. But look again. Because hidden within that flattery is a cage, a soft golden one. It doesn't hold you with force, it holds you with expectation. Now you're the light. That's your identity. That's your job. You smile because people expect it. You laugh because it's what they've come to rely on. And the moment you don't, the moment you're tired or silent or simply honest, instead of entertaining, the room goes quiet. People shift. Faces fall, whispers start. What's wrong with them today? They used to be so uplifting. It begins innocently, but it becomes something much darker. The compliment that once made you feel loved begins to suffocate. It forces you to perform joy even when you're grieving. It forces you to stay cheerful even when you're breaking. And the moment you step outside the character they assigned you, they don't confront you, they just pull away. Cold shoulders, less eye contact, invitations that stop arriving. That's how manipulation works when it wears the face of kindness. It doesn't trap you with criticism, it traps you with praise. And the scariest part, you'll start policing yourself. You'll feel guilty for having a bad day. You'll apologize for needing rest. You'll wonder if you're allowed to be anything other than the bright, smiling version of you they liked best. Machiavelli would have called this a weaponized identity, a role so sweet you're afraid to lose it. And that fear becomes a leash, a way for others to steer you not with commands, but with glances, not with punishment, but with absence. And you won't even realize you're adjusting your tone, your presence, your energy, just to keep their approval alive. Then there's the praise that seems like a badge of honor in modern culture, the kind that calls you real. You're so real, they say, as if it's the highest recognition one can receive in a world of filters and facades. But pause. Who's saying it? And what do they mean? Because sometimes that compliment isn't about celebrating your truth. It's about contrasting you with everyone else. It's not you're real, and I admire that. It's you're real, and they're fake. It draws a quiet line, an unspoken alliance, where the speaker makes themselves your ally in a world full of phonies. It sounds like connection, but it's a setup. Now you're not just real, you're recruited. You've been enlisted into a narrative, one where you're encouraged to feel superior, to feel apart. And from that place of imagined clarity, the manipulation begins. They feed you ideas about who else has sold out, who's lost their authenticity, who's blind to the truth that only you and they supposedly share. That's not admiration. That's grooming. That's psychological leverage dressed as flattery. Because once you've bought into that special bond, they can begin shaping your worldview. Not with orders, but with carefully planted doubts. Not with commands, but with subtle comparisons. And before long, you find yourself seeing the world through their lens, not because you trust them, but because they told you that only the real ones get it. Machiavelli would have recognized this tactic in every court whisper and every rumor that started with, "You're different from the others." It's the easiest way to divide and conquer. Praise someone's purity, then poison it with isolation. Make them feel elevated, then make them feel alone. That's how control slips in, wrapped in the softest words. There's a simple way to recognize when a compliment is a trap. Ask yourself, does this praise isolate me? Does it flatter my identity while quietly building a wall between me and others? If so, it's not a gift, it's a leash. And the one holding it might smile, but their hand is firm. Real compliments don't make you feel indebted. They don't make you feel like you need to live up to them every moment of the day. They empower you. They don't define you. But false ones, they restructure your identity so subtly that you'll start guarding a version of yourself that was never yours to begin with. And that's the point. These compliments aren't meant to attack your confidence directly. That would be too obvious, too easy to reject. Instead, they work by reshaping how you see yourself through the lens of someone else's expectations. They invite you to step into a role, one that seems flattering at first, but slowly begins to tighten around your freedom. You'll find yourself adjusting your tone, softening your strength, staying in your lane. Not because anyone told you to, but because they praised you into it. And that's what makes it deadly. You won't fight back because you won't even know a fight is happening. Machiavellian power doesn't rely on force. It thrives on perception, on understanding how people think, on noticing the subtle shifts that most ignore. The way someone phrases a compliment, the way their tone lingers when they say you're surprisingly capable, the way they smile just a little too long after calling you too good for this place. He knew that rulers weren't always taken down by armies. Sometimes they were softened by applause, flattered into foolishness, praised into vulnerability. He knew that when someone is constantly telling you how amazing you are, they're not always building you up. Sometimes they're boxing you in. And in today's world, that same strategy still thrives. It's not just in politics or courtrooms. It's in board meetings, social circles, comment sections, and even within families. Flattery becomes currency, and compliments become choreography, a way to guide behavior without ever appearing forceful. There's a reason kings once feared jesters more than generals. Jesters could say anything, and get away with it. Because they hid truth in laughter, criticism in charm, and manipulation inside admiration. If you want to rise above that, if you want to move through the world without being gently maneuvered by sweet words, you need to learn to listen differently, not just to the praise itself, but to its purpose, its structure, its timing, who said it, why they said it, and what it might cost you to keep believing it. Because every room you enter will contain at least one person ready to wrap you in silk, dip their words in honey, and aim straight for your self-image. But the moment you learn to recognize the trick, something shifts. Their spell begins to break. You don't need to argue. You don't need to confront. You don't even need to defend. Just nod. Let the compliment land. Let them think it worked. All the while, behind your quiet smile, you're cataloging their words. You're watching, calculating, and silently choosing not to let them define you. Because while they thought they were flattering you into submission, you were already filing them under a different word strategist. There's something deeply unsettling about the way some compliments don't just feel good, they linger. They echo in your mind, not because they lifted you, but because something about them didn't quite sit right. Like a perfect sentence with the wrong punctuation. Like a gift that's too expensive too soon. And that feeling, that dissonance, it's not paranoia. It's your intuition brushing up against manipulation. Take the one that seems the most harmless of all. You're such a good listener. It sounds gentle, respectful. It seems to value your presence. But if you listen closely, there's a quiet message beneath it. A behavioral reward wrapped in praise. It isn't just about your ability to hear, it's about your decision not to speak. The person saying it isn't always thanking you for understanding. Often they're thanking you for not interrupting, for not challenging them, for staying quiet while they take up the space. It's a subtle way of saying, you're easy to talk at. And each time you smile and nod in return, you're reinforcing a role you didn't choose, the agreeable one. The container, the receiver of their narrative. Over time, the praise begins to reshape your value in the relationship. You're not expected to have insights. You're expected to absorb theirs. You're not the speaker, you're the audience. And the more you hear it, you're such a good listener, the more you begin to question if speaking up, disagreeing, or holding the floor for yourself would betray that image. That's the brilliance of the tactic. It creates internal resistance before there's ever an external command. It trains you without commands. It grooms you without rules. And eventually it leads you to sit back in silence, not because they silenced you, but because you chose to maintain the role their compliment assigned to you. Machiavelli would have smiled at that. He knew that the most effective rulers didn't need to shout. They just needed to reward passivity at the right moments. A nod here, a smile there. A gentle phrase that turned identity into obedience. But compliments don't always soften. Sometimes they're sharpened just enough to slip under the skin without tearing it, like the one that arrives with practiced surprise. You're so humble for someone like you. At first, it sounds gracious. It sounds admiring. It says you've achieved something or become someone, and yet you haven't let it go to your head. But then comes the twist for someone like you. That phrase rewrites the entire sentence. It plants a quiet expectation. It implies that people at your level are usually arrogant. That your humility is not a given, but a miracle. That your ego is assumed until proven otherwise. And now you're not just being praised, you're being framed. Because when someone says you're humble for someone like you, they are, without ever saying it outright, calling your ambition suspicious. They're suggesting that your confidence needs monitoring, that your modesty is a relief because your pride must be lurking just beneath the surface. It's the kind of compliment that starts a silent conversation in every room you walk into, one where others begin to watch you differently. They listen for signs of arrogance. They wait for the pride they were told to expect. And if you slip even once, it confirms the narrative someone else already began shaping for you. And now, without knowing why, you start shrinking. You begin to downplay your accomplishments. You soften your tone, add disclaimers to your victories, smile more than you need to. Not because you're kind, but because you're trying to keep a story in check. A story you never wrote. This is how reputations are quietly managed, not with gossip, not with scandal, but with praise. The right kind of praise at the right time can redirect how the world sees you without a single accusation. And the more you try to maintain that polished image, the tighter the leash becomes. That's what makes it so dangerous, because it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like trying to be good. But perhaps the most chilling compliment of all is the one that sounds like a poetic farewell. You're too nice for this world. It lands softly, like a eulogy spoken over a soul still alive. It sounds like mourning disguised as admiration, like someone saying, "Your kindness is beautiful, but it doesn't belong here." And with that sentence, they remove you from the game entirely. It seems gentle, noble even. But listen to what it really says. It tells you that your morality is incompatible with survival, that your virtue is touching but impractical, that your goodness is a weakness dressed in grace. And the more you hear it, the more you start to believe that maybe they're right. You begin pulling away from conflict. You avoid confrontation. You hesitate to draw boundaries, to ask for what you need to take up space. Because somewhere deep inside that phrase echoes again. You're too nice for this world, and it becomes your reason to retreat, your reason to stay small. You stop competing not because you lack ambition, but because you've been quietly convinced that competition would corrupt you. You let others lead not because they're wiser, but because you've been trained to see power as poison. You begin to think that in order to stay good, you must stay silent. And in that silence, the people who gave you that compliment win. Not because they pushed you down, but because they praised you out of the way. Machiavelli feared that kind of ruler more than the cruel one, the one who believed their virtue alone would be enough, the one who thought they didn't need strategy, only sincerity, the one who saw clarity as harsh and compromise as holy. He didn't hate kindness. He feared weakness, pretending it was kindness. Because in power, the two often wear the same face. And when someone tells you you're too nice for this world, they're not admiring your soul. They're predicting your defeat. The only real response is not to harden or to mimic malice. It's to sharpen your clarity, to see what they're trying to do, to recognize that they're placing you outside the battlefield, not to protect you, but to disarm you. And once you see that, you don't need to become ruthless to survive. You simply need to stop apologizing for your strength. The most Machiavellian response isn't to become cruel. It's to be utterly unshakable in your worth. Not loud, not defensive, just resolute. Because that kind of presence can't be manipulated. It can't be praised into submission. And it certainly can't be flattered into silence. It doesn't begin with resistance. It begins with warmth. The kind of warmth that lowers your defenses, that makes you believe you're safe, that tells you someone sees your value. But there's something about certain compliments that don't feel quite right the longer they linger in your memory. They aren't false in content, but in intent. They don't lie outright. They just tell the part of the truth that traps you. And that's the thing Machiavelli understood better than most. Power doesn't always come from pressure. Sometimes it comes from shaping perception. Not by pushing someone to the ground, but by lifting them just enough and handing them the script. Because the most effective manipulation rarely looks like control. It looks like kindness. So when someone tells you you're such a good listener, they might be trying to cast you into silence. When they say, "You're so humble for someone like you," they may be quietly placing your pride under surveillance. And when they softly smile and say, "You're too nice for this world," they might be offering a gentle push out of the arena you were born to rule. And that's what makes it so hard to fight, because you don't see the bars of the cage, they're built from praise. You don't feel the weight of the leash, it's made of admiration. But over time, the effect is the same. You begin to shrink into the version of yourself they applauded. You begin to fear becoming anything else. And the more they tell you how wonderful you are, the more you try to maintain that image, rather than question where it came from or who it truly serves. The trap isn't that they think well of you. The trap is that you start needing them to. Machiavelli would have called this the softest form of power, when someone can shape your behavior without raising their voice, without raising suspicion. When they can own your image of yourself simply by dressing it in gold. And once you start chasing their compliments, you've already handed over control. Because now your power is dependent on their approval. The most dangerous part, you think it was your idea. That's the illusion. You believe you've chosen your path freely, but you've actually been gently herded into it by someone who understood which words would echo inside your mind. And now every time someone praises you for your patience, you swallow your urgency. Every time they compliment your loyalty, you question your right to leave. Every time they call you strong, you feel like you're not allowed to fall apart, because now being human would mean breaking the image. And that image wasn't even yours to begin with. This is the Machiavellian insight. Real manipulation doesn't make you feel small. It makes you feel honored, while it slowly reduces your range of motion, your options, your permission to change. That's the genius of it. The tighter the role, the more you will cling to it. Not because someone's forcing you, but because you've been convinced it's who you are. But here's the shift. Once you begin to see the pattern, once you truly recognize that praise can be as sharp as judgment, you no longer melt when someone flatters you. You begin to calculate. You begin to read the moment, not just feel it. You start to ask, who said this? Why now? What version of me are they applauding? And what do they stand to gain if I keep being that version? Because the compliment that empowers you will make you feel free, but the one that defines you will quietly confine you. That is the only filter you need. Not all praise is poison, but all praise is pressure. And the difference between freedom and manipulation often comes down to one question. Are you still allowed to be more? A compliment that leaves room for your evolution, your contradiction, your full complexity, that's one rooted in respect. But a compliment that locks you into a single trait, a fixed identity, a permanent performance. That's not about honoring you. That's about managing you. Machiavelli never said to reject all kindness. He simply warned, don't confuse admiration with alliance. Don't confuse charm with loyalty. And above all, don't confuse being seen with being safe. The world will not always attack you with sharp words. Sometimes it will smile as it reshapes you. And it's not the cruelty you should fear most. It's the praise that puts you in a position you didn't choose, then watches to see if you stay there. The applause that turns into expectation. The warmth that melts your boundaries. Because once you've accepted a compliment that defines you too narrowly, you'll begin defending that definition. You'll reinforce the very prison someone else built, and you'll call it character. But here's the turning point, the Machiavellian reversal. You don't have to reject praise. You don't even have to confront the people who give it. You simply train your mind to hear it differently, to smile on the outside and question on the inside, to accept the moment, but never the leash. When someone says, you're so selfless, you pause. You ask yourself if they're praising your heart or making sure you don't ask for more. When they say you're always so calm, you ask if they're admiring your peace or warning you not to raise your voice. When they say, you're the strong one, you ask if they're honoring your resilience or excusing their own neglect. You don't fight, you observe. You file the data, because that's the true seat of power. Not needing to argue, not needing to prove, just seeing, clearly, coldly, without flinching. And then, when the moment calls for it, you choose who to be. Not the version others celebrated, not the role they once clapped for, but the one that serves your truth, that aligns with your clarity, that cannot be puppeted by praise, Machiavelli didn't write for the weak. He wrote for those willing to walk through the fire of perception without being consumed by it. He knew that those who fear judgment will always be ruled. But those who understand the structure behind it, they become rulers. Quiet ones, strategic ones, untouchable. Because in the end, compliments are only dangerous to those who crave them, but for the one who sees through them, who nods, while calculating who hears the words, but not the spell. That person becomes free. And in a world ruled by appearances, silence is sometimes the most brilliant form of resistance.